On this week's episode, we talk about potential increases in crop prices, how to prioritize late post applications in soybeans, a crop update in the Northeast, and some observations with potential herbicide carryover in relation to our new LLGT 27 soybeans.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Cup of Joe, episode number 34. Today we have Tommy, Turk, and Ben, and there's a lot of things going on in agriculture right now, and I think we're going to start off again this week with Turk.
One of the big news items this week is the RMA come out with new cover crop information for prevented planting acres. So anybody that had to take prevented planting can put a cover crop on there now. And there was a restriction for November 1st for haying, grading, or feed use. Now they've moved that to September 1st to help out all the livestock guys. And so I think that's big news. Again, check with your local FSA office to get the final details on that. But I think it's going to make a big difference for a lot of folks for sure, and help eliminate some problems and still have an opportunity to get some feed use out of that, or some feed planted on those acres. The other thing is obviously the markets are still jumping around a little bit here, and probably see some sideways choppy trade here for a little bit. Next week, look for fireworks as we see the crop progress report on Monday, and then on the 28th we'll see the planted acres number, which will, I think, set the stage for lots of movement in the markets one way or the other going into the following week.
So the fireworks will be on 4th of July and potentially next week.
Very most likely. You can look for after we come back from the 4th of July weekend to see limit moves one way or the other, I would predict.
I know locally corn's over $4 a bushel cash
Yep.
crop now, and locally here the rivers are finally getting close to back inside their banks, so that the river terminals are starting to take grain, so we're starting to get things moving, but we're still plugged up farther south.
Yeah, I was talking to Danny about that, and we've all seen the pictures of 146. The water level keep going
Extreme
up.
southern Illinois.
Yeah, and so the river is dropping down there, but it's still way above. Even though it's getting close, it's still pushing seep water through, and they can't open the gates to let it out. And so that water on the backside, even though the river is dropping, and the Ohio is coming back and pushing water up, creating more pressure for seep water. So that water is going to continue to rise on the backside of those levees until they can open the gates to start draining it. And that's a ways off yet. They don't even have a date when that's going to happen. So that's going to continue to haunt those folks down there in that area as the Ohio is running bank full and out of its banks as well.
Well, there's something about the longest day of the year, and then once we start going into shorter days, which is it's going to occur very quickly here. It seems like the rain usually shuts off, and July is always noted as being a dry month. So we'll see if that pattern holds true over history or if it changes. But I would think that we might be asking for some water maybe in 2 or 3 weeks from now.
Well, let's hope we get some dry weather and get the rest of this crop put in for sure.
Absolutely. Ben, what do you have for us today?
I've been catching lots of phone calls about concerns about dinging soybeans up a little bit for their first spray programs, your first post programs, I guess is what I'm getting at. I'd just like to remind guys kind of to prioritize and think about flowers and blooming and which fields do we need to spend the most attention on before we get really worried, because guys are concerned that, well, our first post application is going to happen after the legal spray date. What's the consequences of this? Well, flowering on the later planted soybeans isn't going to be as rapid. We're not going to have as many flowers on a plant this year as we would have in a normal year, because the soybeans are delayed and they haven't gone through as much vegetative growth. So just kind of remind guys to go ahead and try to get the beans that are planted first the ones that are going to have the most flowers on, those would be the ones that I'd spend the most time and attention on, and work your way to the beans that were put in the ground last week.
Well, physiologically speaking, most of the soybeans that abort are the first ones and the last ones.
The flowers.
The flowers.
Yep.
So consequently, these spray applications, and this R1 is not as detrimental to yield as is if you delay that and spray in full R2, which is full flower.
Correct.
So,
and it's challenging. There's not a lot of guys that are struggling to get over post programs, but use robust rates, get your residual thrown in there, like what I've said the past couple
small
of days.
Small weeds, the best. It's definitely a 2 to 4 inch tall weed, and we're going to get one shot at this, so we want to make sure we get our right sprayer tip, make sure we're using the right additives, and watch the wind speed and all the other things that come into application.
Correct.
We've got another topic, but we'll save that till last. That we noticed on a call in from Brian Rigginator, Turk's son. But Tommy, what do you have?
I've been this past week. I've gone over to eastern Illinois, up to Wisconsin, northern Iowa, and I've kind of made the loop back down to here. Crop progress still a little slow. Central Illinois up to, let's say, I-80 looks pretty decent as far as getting their corn and soybeans in. You get to the Woodstock area, northern Illinois, still quite a bit of soybeans to go there, but Bureau County has been declared one of the most preventative planted counties in the state of Illinois, and it's kind of that trend's fallen up to that northeast pattern up into Wisconsin, but and it followed a lot of the late rains that we've been getting. But for the most part, everybody's in pretty good spirits, considering a lot of, I know this preventative planting that Turk was just talking about, delaying that back to September 1st is going to help a lot of guys. So crop progress pretty good as far as what's in the ground. I mean, obviously, like Ben was talking, a lot of delays here, but the most important thing I would say is, some of these restrictions were to help your crop. I know even the dicamba restrictions is to help your crop, but even though things get later here and everybody gets in a hurry, try not to get in too big of a rush. And you got time to do it the first time. You don't want to have to go back and keep doing it a second or third time. So take your time, relax, and make sure you do it right the first time. And but as far as soybeans and corn in the ground, I know there's been a lot of companies out there tearing up seed production ground to either replant or to plant new seed production for corn or soybeans. And that's been going on in Nebraska all the way to northern Illinois. So that's going to be interesting moving forward for next year with these, treated supply and the cost of products, because that just adds to some of these companies' overhead. But for the most part, with
corn in particular is the big one. I mean, when they're tearing up soybean stands to plant seed production corn,
there's a lot of money involved in that.
Yeah, there's the whole seed crop is in flux right now in the corn area. Not so much on soybeans. I think we'll have enough soybeans, but on the seed corn side, there's we're hearing the folks having problems. So,
it's a pretty radical thing.
Yeah, so it's still to play out yet.
But for the most part, everything's looking pretty decent. And like I said, the preventive plant acres, that's a good blessing in disguise with getting September 1st. To be able to hay and graze and use silage for that. But other than that, just been on the road a lot, Joe. So
okay, well, the big thing that I noticed this week was our area sales manager, Brian Rigginator, was looking at a field, and this particular field was split between LibertyLink GT27s and a non-LibertyLink GT27 soybean. In other words, one that did not have the Group 27 herbicide tolerance. And to the row, and we're going to put this picture up, to the row, you could see differences in the quality of the stand. And what it has to do with is LibertyLink GT27s, have some tolerance to the Group 27 herbicides. In this particular field had Callisto on it last year. So Ben, would you elaborate a little bit more about what we think we're seeing? We don't know for sure. And I'll add some more comments about from the yield aspect at the end here. But I think this is something that this year, with a lot of post applications of corn using Group 27 herbicides on, that we're getting, very late, and there's how long's the restriction? 10 month. 10-month restriction. We could be pushing up against that 10-month restriction next year, so it may make a lot of sense to use a LibertyLink GT27 following products that you're putting on your corn right now. And let's just elaborate a little bit about that.
So the product that they used was Callisto up there. That's a mesotrione, is the active in that product. According to the label, or what they said, they followed the label. They had the 10-month plant back perfect. 3 ounces of Callisto is what they used, and what they were seeing was possibly some carryover or bleaching is what in theory could have happened. Typically, we don't see a lot of injury from something like this, but pH plays a big role. The pH on the soil was a little bit higher. Typically, we see carryover in times where there's not a heck of a lot of rain, but there is a definite difference. What could easily be seen as bleaching, which is what Group 27 herbicides do, on the beans that were not HPPD resistant. And it's just an observation. It's something that we continue to look into further.
What I can tell you from the yield standpoint, this is something that we noticed a year ago in the research plots. When we had combinations of LibertyLink GT27s, and we had Enlist E3, and there might have been some Extend soybeans in there, and Roundup Ready 2s, and the whole thing. We'd get a plot, we'd harvest the data, and all of a sudden everything that was LibertyLink GT27 was at the top. And we feel pretty good about our genetics, but we know that it's not possible to have every LibertyLink GT27 at the top. So then we investigate what was put on the year before, and many times it was a Group 27 herbicide. It was a Group 27 herbicide. So we drew the conclusion that there is a potential, small amounts can hurt the yield a little bit, at least theoretically. It's something we're watching and we're paying attention to. And what we're trying to do today is just alert farmers that if you are using Group 27 herbicides on your corn, it's logical and would make sense to use a soybean like LibertyLink GT27 to eliminate any potential risk at this point until we get this totally documented scientifically.
Correct. And I don't know whether this is just an observation that I've made and some things that I've heard. I don't know if it is the insertion point that allows for the balance, or if the chemistry itself between the 4 different classes of Group 27s, but there is because balance and Callisto are 2 different things. Isoxafludol and mesotrione are 2 different things, but it's either the insertion in the soybean or it's the chemistry itself that are so much alike, because we can cross paths. We can deal with a little bit of mesotrione, and that's what your advantage is. We can deal with a little bit of, the product like Armazon or Impact. I mean, the beans have a little bit of resistance to all Group 27s.
It appears.
And but the main resistance obviously is to balance
and
at full rates.
There's nothing on the label. There's nothing scientific.
Nope.
These are all at this point theories, and we need more time to investigate. But we're just seeing this out in the field. And if you're a farmer, managing your crop, trying to get the maximum yield, this might be something to put in the back of your head to say, hey, if I'm applying a lot of Group 27 herbicides really late on my corn this year because of the late planting, maybe best way to protect myself, if there is such an issue, is to use a LibertyLink GT27, because we are seeing that this year in where we can clearly define the lines. And then we also saw it a little bit in some of our replicated research trials that there was something going on there. And again, it's not talked about, and it's because it's not totally documented and scientific yet at this point, but it's an observation. And our job is to try to help our customers raise the highest yields possible. So we're passing on this tip to say, hey, this might make sense. In other words, something to think about, something to consider. So that's what we have, and that's why we put the picture up. That's why we wanted you to see it firsthand, the same thing we are. You can draw your own conclusions, and if you see something out in your fields, give us a call and we'll take a look at it. But this is new technology, and so we're learning about it. And so I think that's the exciting thing about it, is to have some because we really think a lot of the Group 27 herbicides are great herbicides, and putting the two together between corn and soybeans and having something that yields better, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the yield results with that being a side-by-side of two different varieties.
Yeah, and if it's clearly one side is dominant over the other side, and this happens to be in a test plot, so we will be taking basically every 12 rows to yield across that field. So we're going to get some good data out of that, and we appreciate our dealer up in Ionia giving us a heads up on this, because he's the one that noticed it. And Brian went up and figured it out real quick that there's something different here. And looking at the herbicide program, that's the only thing we could draw to that made the difference.
Right. And I mean, just think about where the numbers are at right now, though. Think about what today's date is.
Right.
There are still fields of HPPD getting used right now. Halix GT is an extremely popular product. Where does that take us to? April 20th.
Right.
Yep.
Next year's soybean crop. So you're not even going to be you're in the plant back window. I mean, we're not talking about carryover that happens 12 months. We're talking, it's just, you're what I'm trying to make my point is you're exactly correct in the fact that we're going to be dealing with this problem even more
Next year.
than we've ever seen across the board.
And that's another important thing to think about is, this is going to be the year to remember what your chemical record is, what's going on those fields, and to keep track of everything to the T to understand what you're going to do for
And it's the same thing for soybeans too. Whatever residuals you're using, pay close attention to make sure that they're not going to antagonize your corn crop next year.
We have the same thing on soybeans and possibly affecting next year's corn crop.
That's correct.
Because
Correct.
of the late applications.
Group 2s, we see a lot of Group 2 damage
Yep.
in years like this.
So that's our big take-home message today, and I think this is something that can definitely make a farmer some money if he pays attention to it. And I know right now our focus is just killing weeds, trying to get through this year, but we really got to start thinking about next year already.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, as always, thank you for your business. We sincerely appreciate those of you that watch our YouTube broadcast here, and we encourage you to tell other folks about it. And if at any time you have a question, just go ahead and email us either through our website at merseeds@mershmanseeds.com, or talk to any of us individually, and we'd be glad to address it at the next episode. So see you next week. Thank you.